I was standing on my parents' front porch, holding an envelope that confirmed my grandfather had secretly willed me 2 working ranches and a luxury home in Los Angeles. I was about to step inside and share the miracle. But then I heard my mother's voice through the door, and it made my blood freeze to ice. My blood ran cold. One moment, I was standing on my parents' porch, clutching an envelope that held a secret, a legacy from my grandfather. The next, I heard my mother's voice through the door, plotting to take everything from me. Can you imagine the gut-wrenching betrayal of hearing your own family conspiring to have you declared incompetent just so they could steal everything? They thought I was a broken soldier, coming home to fall apart. They had no idea I was the one holding all the cards. And this is how I let them walk straight into their own trap. I'd just come home from the funeral, my heart slamming so hard against my ribs it hurt to breathe. The drive back? Just a long, gray ribbon of highway. The world narrowed to lane lines, the occasional flash of a truck, the radio nothing but static and unwanted voices. By the time I turned onto my parents' street, my hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, my jaw aching from clenching. I parked at the curb, out of habit, and just sat there for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled. The late afternoon light made the neighborhood look too clean, too normal, lawns clipped, porch flags limp, a kid's bike abandoned like nothing in the world had ever broken. When I finally stepped out, the air smelled faintly of fertilizer and warm asphalt. I stood on that familiar porch, one hand raised to knock. The other gripped a thick envelope. It felt heavy, not just from its contents, but from the sheer weight of what it represented. An entire future, folded into legal language. My thumb rubbed the sealed edge, feeling the texture of the glue, the stiff give of the cardstock. Inside was truth. The kind of truth families burn themselves down over. The kind that turns love into arithmetic. I was about to tell them that Grandpa had secretly left me 2 working ranches and a luxury home in Los Angeles. I was about to walk in and be the bearer of a miracle and a scandal all at once. To watch their faces, to try and read if surprise could ever look like pride. But then I heard my mother's voice through the door, muffled by wood and distance. And what she said next made my blood turn to ice. I froze there, knuckles hovering inches from the wood, my breath shallow and loud in my own ears. My lungs felt too small, like grief had moved in and filled the space where air was supposed to be. The porch boards were familiar under my boots. One plank near the left corner had always flexed and creaked. It did now. A small betrayal of sound. The house looked exactly the same as it had the day I left for basic training all those years ago. Peeling white paint on the railing my father had promised to repaint more than once. Wind chimes clinking softly. The front window with the lace curtains my mother refused to replace. But I wasn't the same person who'd left. I had just buried my grandfather, the only man in that family who had ever looked at me and seen more than a problem to manage. More than the difficult daughter. More than the one who ran off to play soldier. With him, my sharpness had been something to shape into tools, not something to blunt with shame. With him, my silence had been respected, not used as proof I was guilty of something unnamed. The funeral had been quiet. Too quiet. A small chapel, narrow pews, stained glass turning sunlight into thin stripes of color over the carpet. It was like someone had spilled paint and never cleaned it up. Only a handful of people. No dramatic speeches, just the steady smell of old wood, lilies, and dust. The kind of dust that lives in corners and never leaves. Even the organ music had sounded restrained, like it knew it didn't have the right to be loud. I'd stood there in my black uniform jacket, ribbons neat on my chest, hands clasped tight to keep them from shaking. Not because I was weak had never kept me alive, but because grief has a way of slipping past even the strongest armor. It goes for the places you don't train. It touches the soft underbelly you pretend isn't there. I'd stared at the casket until the lines blurred, my throat burning with things I didn't say. I could feel eyes on me, some curious, some judgmental, most indifferent. In that room, I was both decorated and disposable. Afterward, his attorney had pressed the envelope into my hands in the parking lot, where the wind cut through our clothes and carried the scent of exhaust. The lawyer's hands had been cool and dry, his suit too crisp for a day like that. He didn't look like a man who comforted people. He looked like a man who managed outcomes. "Read this somewhere safe," he'd said quietly, the words falling between us like a warning. I hadn't opened it yet. I already knew what it contained, not in legal phrasing, but in the shape of it. What Grandpa had told me, and what he hadn't dared to put into anyone else's hands. Grandpa had told me everything months ago during one of our long phone calls when I was stationed states away. The kind that happened late at night when he couldn't sleep, and I couldn't either. I'd been sitting on a metal bunk, back against the wall, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant noise of other lives. He trusted me with the truth because he didn't trust anyone else with it. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even his church friends with their baked casseroles and smiling eyes. "You understand responsibility," he'd said, his voice steady with age but still sharp around the edges. "And you understand silence." He was right. Silence was not something that happened to me. It was something I used. And now that silence wrapped around me again as voices drifted through the closed front door. My mother's voice came first, low, sharp, controlled. The tone she used when she wanted to sound calm, but needed everyone to know she was in charge. "She's here." I saw her car. My stomach dropped like the ground had shifted beneath me. My father replied, his tone clipped in that familiar way that meant he was already irritated. "Good. Everyone remember what we talked about?" I swallowed hard. What we talked about, then my younger brother laughed. A short, careless sound, like he was watching a show he already knew the ending to. "Just don't let her get dramatic. She always does that." My sister chimed in. Softer, but no kinder. Her voice carrying the precise, polished edge she'd learned from my mother. "Do you think she'll try to take charge? You know how she gets. Acting like she's better than everyone." Something cold settled deep in my chest. Not just anger, but a kind of numb recognition. My mother again, the words measured like she was slicing fruit. "That's why we have to stay calm. Sympathetic. If she thinks we're on her side, she'll sign whatever we put in front of her." My fingers tightened around the envelope until the paper bit into my palm. "Sign what?" my father exhaled sharply. "The lawyer said it's easier if she cooperates, especially with her history." History. That one word hit me harder than any insult. It was a shorthand they used to reduce my entire life into something broken and inconvenient. A label that let them do what they wanted while pretending they were doing it for my benefit. My mother lowered her voice further, as if hush made cruelty polite. "PTSD. Long deployments. Exhaustion. We can frame it as concern. We're worried about her mental state, after the funeral, after the military." The porch tilted slightly under my boots. Not from dizziness, my balance was fine. But from the way reality warped when you realized your own family was rehearsing how to dismantle you. My sister hesitated, and for half a heartbeat I heard something like doubt. "Is that legal?" "Oh, don't be naive," my mother snapped, impatience flaring. "It's for her own good. Temporary guardianship, just until things are settled." Guardianship. The word rang in my head like a gunshot. Loud, clean, and final. My brother laughed again. Heavier this time, like the sound of a door locking. "Once it's done, she won't be able to touch anything without us. Makes things simpler." I felt sick. Bile rising with the sudden heat of rage that had nowhere to go. My father's voice turned practical, almost bored, like they were discussing insurance. "The doctor is coming tomorrow morning. He owes us a favor. He'll do the evaluation, sign the paperwork. We just need her tired, confused, emotional." There it was. The plan. They weren't just talking about controlling documents. They were talking about controlling me. My money, my choices, my body, my future. My mother sighed the way she did when she thought she was being reasonable. As if the words "for your own good" could wash blood off a knife. Honestly, this is better than letting her mess things up. She's never been good with money, or decisions, or family. I stared at the door, my reflection faint in the glass. A woman with her hair pulled back, face drawn tight, eyes older than they used to be. A decorated service member, a woman trusted with lives, equipment, classified operations. And behind that door, I was still the family liability, the thing they managed like a budget line. My brother spoke again, eager now, greedy enough to forget to hide it. Once everything's under our control, we can sell one of the ranches, or both. The LA house alone could be enough. My father cut in. One step at a time. First, we secure authority. Then, we talk assets. Assets, they were already counting money they didn't even know they couldn't touch. I closed my eyes. For one brief, foolish moment, I had imagined walking into that house and telling them the truth. Imagined relief on their faces. Gratitude. Maybe even pride. I had imagined saying, "It's okay. Grandpa took care of us. We're safe." The thought tasted like something sweet that had gone stale. The envelope in my hand suddenly felt heavier than steel. I could knock right now. I could confront them. I could throw the truth in their faces and watch the masks fall. Watch the rehearsal crumble into panic. But Grandpa's voice echoed in my head, steady and calm, the way it had been when he taught me to mend fence wire and to wait before striking. Silence is not weakness, it's timing. I took a slow breath through my nose, tasting the dust in the air. Then another. I listened until the voices inside softened into movement. Chairs shifting, footsteps crossing the kitchen tile, the faint clink of a dish. When I opened the door, I didn't storm in. I didn't slam it. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I stepped inside quietly, wearing the exact expression they expected. Exhausted, hollow, grieving. My mother rushed toward me with open arms and a face full of practiced concern, her perfume drifting ahead of her like a warning label. "Oh, honey," she murmured, pressing her cheek to my hair as if affection could erase intent. "You must be so tired." My father nodded solemnly from a few steps back. "Long drive." My siblings hovered nearby, eyes sharp, measuring. I let my shoulders sag. I let my gaze soften. I let my voice come out quiet and thin, like a thread about to snap. "Yeah," I said. "It's been a lot." My mother guided me toward the couch like I might break if she let go. "Sit down. You shouldn't be making any big decisions right now." I met her eyes and nodded obediently, letting her see exactly what she wanted to see. Inside, something else had already started to harden. Not into rage, not into grief, but into a clear, cold determination. They thought I was vulnerable. They thought I was alone. They thought I was the one walking into a trap. They had no idea I was already planning my way out. I sat on my parents' couch like I'd done 1,000 times before, hands folded in my lap, boots carefully planted on the rug my mother vacuumed in perfect lines. The living room light was too bright, the kind of brightness meant to announce cleanliness and control. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and overcooked coffee. A scent that once had meant home in the simplest, dumbest way. Now it made my stomach twist, because I could feel what it covered, the mildew of resentment in the walls, the rot underneath the polish. My uniform jacket was folded beside me. Ribbons hidden, as if even my service needed permission to exist in this room. I'd kept it on at first, out of habit, like armor, then peeled it off because I didn't want to give them anything to argue with. My mother hovered. She always did that when she thought she had the upper hand. She brought me a glass of water I hadn't asked for, then adjusted a throw pillow behind my back as if I were fragile porcelain instead of someone who had slept on concrete and sand and learned to wake at the smallest shift of air. "You look pale," she said softly, eyes scanning my face like she was cataloging symptoms. "Have you been eating?" "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my voice even. Tired, but even. My father stood near the doorway, arms crossed, observing. He never hovered. He evaluated. His eyes flicked from my face to my hands, to the faint scar along my knuckle. The one I'd gotten fixing something in a hurry, because there was never time to be careful. I wondered what he saw. Whether he saw the woman who had coordinated teams under pressure, who had made decisions in seconds that couldn't be undone, or whether he saw only what he'd decided long ago, the daughter who wouldn't do things the right way because she wouldn't do them his way. My brother dropped into the armchair across from me, phone already in his hand, thumb scrolling as if my grief were background noise. My sister leaned against the counter with her arms folded, her expression carefully neutral. We looked like a family gathered for comfort. We sounded like it too, at least on the surface. "I'm sorry about Grandpa," my sister said, voice measured. "I know you two were close." I nodded, letting the truth settle in my chest like a stone. That part was true. He was the only one who called me first instead of last. The only one who asked what I needed instead of telling me what I should do. He'd been the only one who didn't treat my silence as guilt. "He believed in you," my father said, and there was something like resentment slipping through the words, as if belief were an accusation. "He worried about you a lot." I almost laughed, but the sound died before it reached my throat. Grandpa hadn't worried about me. He'd worried about them. About what they would do when they thought they were entitled. My mother sat beside me and placed a hand over mine. Her grip was warm, firm, a little too tight. Possessive. "Sweetheart. After everything you've been through, losing him, your deployments." She shook her head like she was overwhelmed by my suffering. "It's okay to let us help." Help. In this house, help had always meant control. Strings tied to every kindness, a ledger kept silently. I swallowed and let my gaze drop, like a good, compliant daughter. "I don't really know what to do right now," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to get through today." It was the first brick in the wall I was building, and I felt it settle into place. They exchanged looks, subtle, quick, the kind they'd practiced without realizing it. A whole language of signals they thought I couldn't read. My father cleared his throat. "Did the lawyer say anything about paperwork?" There it was, slipped into the conversation like a knife into a sleeve. I hesitated just long enough to make it believable. "He mentioned some documents." I let my eyes go unfocused, as if the words were too much to hold. But honestly, it all felt overwhelming. My brother finally looked up from his phone, interest flickering. "Did Grandpa leave anything complicated? Debts? Properties?" I shook my head slowly, letting uncertainty coat my words. "From what I understand, it's not good news." My mother's fingers tightened around mine. "What do you mean?" I took a careful breath, as if it pained me to say it. "There may be some outstanding taxes, legal fees. The attorney said it could take time to sort out." I let my voice dip lower. "I might even be responsible for some of it." Silence dropped into the room like a weight. My sister's face tightened, concern dissolving into calculation. My brother leaned back, suddenly disinterested, as if grief were only worth attention when it came with profit. My father's jaw set, the muscle ticking near his temple. My mother recovered first, smoothing her expression back into concern, the mask sliding into place with practiced ease. "Oh, honey, that's a lot for one person." "It is," I agreed, letting my shoulders slump. My father nodded slowly. "Well, we'll need to make sure you don't sign anything hastily." I looked up at him, letting a faint question show. "I thought that was my decision." Of course, he said quickly, too quickly. We just want to protect you. Protect, I bit back, the bitter smile threatening to surface. The conversation drifted after that, circling without landing. They asked about my drive, my unit, whether I was sleeping, whether I felt on edge. Each question was gentle, reasonable, something you could repeat to a stranger and sound like a devoted family. Each one felt like a thread being measured for a net. As they spoke, my mind kept slipping backward, back through the years that had led us here. I remembered being 17, standing in the same living room with the same lemon cleaner smell, announcing I'd enlisted. My mother had cried, not with pride, but with fear and embarrassment, as if my choice reflected on her in public. My father had gone quiet, his disappointment heavy and unspoken, the kind that filled a room without needing language. My siblings had laughed later, called me dramatic, reckless. You could have gone to college like everyone else, my sister had said, eyes wide with the righteousness of normal. Why do you always have to be so extreme? The military hadn't been extreme. It had been structured, clear, honest. If you did your job, you earned respect. If you failed, you owned it. No guessing games, no whispered plans behind closed doors, no love dangled like a reward. I'd sent money home on every deployment, paid off small debts they never acknowledged. Fixed things quietly, the way Grandpa taught me. Handle your responsibilities. Don't brag about them, but in this house, none of that counted. Here, I was still the daughter who left, the one who didn't fit, the one who needed supervision. My mother stood and announced she was making dinner. My sister joined her, and the two of them moved around the kitchen in familiar choreography, pots clinking, water running, cabinets opening and closing with brisk certainty. My brother disappeared down the hallway, already bored. My father sat across from me, studying his hands like he was choosing the right words from a limited supply. You know, he said finally, voice calm in a way that was meant to sound wise. After trauma, people don't always see things clearly. I met his gaze, keeping my face blank. What kind of trauma? He shrugged. Combat, loss, stress. His eyes held mine, searching for the moment I would flinch or confess. I nodded slowly, as if I were considering it. That's true. He seemed encouraged by my agreement. Sometimes it helps to let family handle things for a while. I leaned back into the couch cushion, feeling the fabric press against my spine. Maybe, I said. For a little while, the trap was closing, and they thought I was stepping into it willingly. Later that night, they showed me the guest room. Same as always, soft beige walls, a dresser that smelled faintly of cedar, a quilt folded with tight corners, clean sheets. No lock on the door. My phone was on the dresser where I'd left it earlier, but when I checked it, the battery was nearly dead. An unlikely coincidence that made my stomach tighten. We'll plug it in downstairs, my mother said brightly, already reaching for it. So you can rest. I let her take it. I watched the screen go dark in her hand and felt the urge to snatch it back, to demand, to fight. But fighting now would feed their narrative. It would give them the emotional outburst they needed. So I nodded and murmured thanks, and let her walk away with my line to the world. As the door closed behind her, I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and listened. To the house settle. Pipes ticking, floorboards creaking, a distant cough. Familiar sounds that suddenly felt foreign, like I was hearing them through a different language. I reached into my bag and felt the edge of the envelope hidden beneath my clothes. Solid. Real. The paper was a promise and a weapon. They thought I was disoriented. They thought grief had softened me. They thought authority flowed only one way in this family. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a quiet promise to myself, the kind that didn't need a witness. I would let them believe exactly what they wanted, right up until the moment it cost them everything they thought they controlled. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay on the narrow guest bed, listening to the house breathe, counting the small sounds the way I'd learned to do on deployments. Vents clicking on and off, the refrigerator humming, my father's footsteps pacing once before midnight. Every sound told me where everyone was. Every silence told me when they thought I was asleep. At some point after 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard my mother's voice again. Low, careful. She was in the kitchen, probably with my father. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I already knew the script. Concern. Timing. Paperwork. Tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, the doctor would arrive. I stared at the ceiling and let the anger rise, then settle. Anger was useful, but only if it didn't take the wheel. Grandpa used to say, the worst mistakes are made by people who confuse rage for clarity. I needed clarity. I needed patience. I needed timing. At dawn, I slipped out of bed and dressed quietly. I left my uniform folded, choosing plain jeans and a sweatshirt instead. I wanted to look small, ordinary, unthreatening. In the bathroom mirror, I practiced the face they expected. Tired eyes, shoulders slightly rounded, mouth pulled into a thin line of grief. I hated the performance, but I understood it. It was reconnaissance. It was camouflage. Downstairs, my mother was already awake, moving quickly, efficiently, the way she did when she believed she was managing a crisis. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. You're up early. Didn't sleep well, I said. She nodded sympathetically. Of course you didn't. Breakfast was oatmeal, thin and watery. The kind of meal that looked like care but felt like punishment. She placed the bowl in front of me and watched as I ate a few spoonfuls, then paused. You don't have much of an appetite. I guess not, my voice stayed mild. She exchanged a glance with my father across the table. Subtle, but unmistakable. A mark on the checklist. Evidence. By mid-morning, my brother and sister had gathered in the living room, all of us orbiting the same unspoken center. My phone was still downstairs, plugged in somewhere out of sight. When I asked for it, my mother smiled apologetically. Oh, honey, it's charging. You don't want to be distracted today. Distracted from what? I thought. But I only nodded. At 10 sharp, the doorbell rang. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. This wasn't a firefight. This was something colder. Paperwork. Authority. A quiet cage built with polite words. My mother opened the door with both hands clasped, posture radiating relief. Doctor, thank you so much for coming. He stepped inside. Mid-50s. Expensive jacket. Practiced warmth in his eyes. He smelled faintly of aftershave and coffee. He smiled at me like I was already a patient. You must be her, he said gently. I'm Dr. Collins. I nodded slowly, the way they wanted me to. Hi. He took a seat across from me, setting a leather folder on the coffee table with careful precision. Your family's been very worried. I know, I murmured, gaze lowered. My sister jumped in, voice quick, eager to be helpful in the cruelest way. She's been so forgetful lately, and jumpy. My brother added, she barely eats. Dr. Collins nodded gravely, making a note. The pen scratched lightly, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Grief can manifest in many ways. My father leaned forward. We just want to make sure she's protected. Protected again. The words sat between us like bait. The doctor asked simple questions at first. The date, the day of the week, where we were. I answered them correctly, but slowly, letting my voice trail, letting my hands tremble just enough. I let my gaze drift to the window as if I was slipping away from the room. A performance, yes, but also a test of them. I watched how quickly they leaned into the narrative, how hungry they were to confirm it. Then he shifted gears. Have you been experiencing confusion, difficulty making decisions? I hesitated. Sometimes. My mother reached out, placing her hand over mine. She doesn't mean to, doctor. She's always been so independent. The implication hung there, too independent to know what's good for her. The doctor nodded, expression calm, almost kind. It might be wise to consider temporary measures, just until things stabilize. I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time, letting my expression stay quiet, but not empty. What kind of measures? He smiled, calm and reassuring. Support, oversight, someone to help manage responsibilities. I glanced around the room. My family watched me closely, waiting for me to nod, to agree, to hand over the wheel like a child giving up scissors. Instead, I asked carefully, like guardianship? The room went very still. My mother laughed lightly, the sound brittle. Oh, honey, don't use such a heavy word. But that's what it is, I said quietly. Dr. Collins cleared his throat. It can be framed many ways. I leaned back, letting the softness drain from my posture. Not all at once, just enough to change the air. I've been responsible for classified operations, I said, my voice steady. For people's lives. My father stiffened. This isn't the time. It is, I interrupted, and the word landed flat and certain. Because you're not worried about me. You're worried about control. My mother's smile faltered. Sweetheart, you're confused. No, I said. I'm clear. Dr. Collins closed his folder slowly, as if ending a meeting. I think emotions are running high. They are, I agreed. Which is why you should leave. My sister gasped, offended on his behalf, on theirs, on the entire structure they'd built. You can't talk to him like that. I can, I replied. And I am. I turned to the doctor, keeping my tone controlled. Professional, the way I spoke to officers who didn't like being challenged. You were invited here under false pretenses. There's no medical emergency, no consent, and no authority. He stood, uncomfortable now, eyes flicking to my parents like he was looking for instructions. This is a family matter. Yes, I said. And you're not family. He didn't argue. He gathered his folder and left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded for a moment like victory. For a beat, no one spoke. Then my mother exploded, the mask snapping off. What is wrong with you? Do you know how embarrassing that was? I stood up slowly, feeling my body settle into its own weight, feeling the ground under my feet become steady again. What's embarrassing, I said, is planning to declare your own daughter incompetent. My father's face darkened. Watch your tone. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. The paper made a dry sound as it slid free, like something unsheathed. Before you say another word, I said, you should know something. Their eyes locked on the envelope. Hunger, fear, recognition. Grandpa didn't leave me debts, I continued. He left me assets. Silence. 2 working ranches, I said. And a house in Los Angeles. My brother swore under his breath. My sister's mouth fell open. My father's eyes sharpened, anger and disbelief wrestling in his face. My mother took a step toward me, her expression already rearranging itself into joy, as quick and practiced as a stage actor hitting a cue. Oh, sweetheart, she breathed, voice suddenly warm as honey. Why didn't you say so? Grandpa always had such good instincts. I folded the envelope back into my bag. Because now, I said calmly, I know exactly who you are. They changed immediately. I had seen it happen before, on base, in briefing rooms, where power shifted with a single sentence. Faces rearranged themselves, voices softened, spines straightened. The moment I said Los Angeles, the air in the living room warmed as if someone had adjusted the thermostat. My mother reached for me with both hands this time. Honey, that's wonderful news. My sister let out a breathy laugh. Wow. Wow. My brother was already calculating. I could see it in the darting of his eyes, the bounce of his foot. The way his attention sharpened like a predator catching scent. LA property alone is insane right now. My father stayed quiet, which was how I knew he was angry, not relieved. Angry that I hadn't told him sooner. Angry that control had slipped through his fingers. I didn't give them time to recover. I didn't give them documents. I didn't give them numbers. I'm exhausted, I said. I need rest. My mother nodded eagerly, overflowing with manufactured tenderness. Of course, you've been through so much. That night, the house shifted. Dinner was better. Real chicken, not soup. Vegetables with actual seasoning. The heat was turned up. My phone reappeared on the nightstand, fully charged, as if it had never been taken. Small comforts returned like favors being offered, like bribes. It was almost impressive how quickly they adapted. But cruelty, once revealed, doesn't disappear. It only learns new disguises. The next morning, my father asked if I wanted coffee. He hadn't made me coffee in years. My sister offered to run errands together. My brother joked about how proud he was of me. Each kindness landed wrong, like applause at a funeral. I played along. I smiled when expected. I thanked them. I let them think they had salvaged the situation. But I also noticed what didn't change. My mail didn't arrive. My mother said she'd sorted it to help. When I asked where the car keys were, my father said he'd moved them for safety. When I tried to step outside alone, my sister asked where I was going, tone light but eyes sharp. It was subtle, plausible, deniable. They weren't abandoning the plan. They were adjusting it. By the third day, the tone shifted again. Less syrup, more pressure. You've been pacing at night, my mother said over breakfast, watching me carefully as I stirred coffee I barely tasted. I couldn't sleep, I replied, letting my voice stay flat. That's not healthy, she said. And the way she said it made it sound like a diagnosis. My sister chimed in. You jumped when the door slammed yesterday. It surprised me, I said. My brother laughed. You've always been jumpy. My father folded his newspaper with deliberate neatness. You know, after long-term stress, symptoms can come and go. I took a slow sip of coffee. What symptoms? Disorientation, he said calmly. Irritability. Difficulty trusting loved ones. There it was. The language. Clinical. Prepared. A script that would sound reasonable on paper. That afternoon, my mother sat beside me on the couch, the same spot as before. She held my hand again, thumb rubbing my knuckles as if soothing me, as if claiming me. We love you, she said. And because we love you, we think you should talk to someone. I tilted my head. Talk to who? A specialist, she replied gently. Just to make sure you're okay. I pulled my hand back, keeping my expression steady. We already tried that. She smiled, patient. This one is different. I stood. I'm going for a walk. My father rose instantly. I'll come with you. No, I said, and the word came out firmer than I intended. I need air. He hesitated, then nodded with forced calm. Just don't go far. I walked around the block, my phone buzzing in my pocket with messages I couldn't yet answer. The neighborhood sunlight, too bright, too indifferent. Each step felt watched. When I returned, my brother was waiting by the door like a guard who wanted to pretend he wasn't. Where'd you go? He asked, too quickly. Outside. He smiled, but his eyes stayed sharp. Just checking. That night, I heard them again. Whispers after midnight. My door was closed, but the house carried sound like a drum. She's suspicious, my sister said. My mother sighed. We have to move faster. She knows about the property, my brother muttered. What if she already did something? My father's voice cut through, cold and final. Then we tighten the net. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, my pulse steady. I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had burned off, leaving focus behind. They were escalating. That meant time was no longer neutral. Waiting wasn't rest. Waiting was risk. At 3:12 a.m., I slipped into the bathroom, locked the door, and took out my phone. The screen's glow lit my hands, pale against the darkness. I dialed the number Grandpa had insisted I save months ago. It rang twice. Counselor Hayes, a man answered, voice alert despite the hour. This is Evelyn, I said. I need to move. There was a pause, just long enough to weigh my words. Are you safe? Not for long, I replied. They're building a case. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't need to. I'll set things in motion, he said. Trust first, account second. Do not sign anything. Do not leave with anyone. I won't. And Evelyn, he added quietly, the tone changing into something almost human. You're doing the right thing. I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked older than it had a week ago. Harder. Clearer. The kind of face you get when you stop hoping people will become better and start dealing with what they are. Back in my room, I lay down fully dressed. By morning, the house would feel different again. It always did when plans were underway. They thought they were breaking me down, making me smaller, slower, easier to manage. They didn't realize they were just giving me time. Time to lock down what was mine. Time to document everything. Time to prepare. By the time they tried to close the door, I would already be gone. The first confirmation came 2 days later, in the quietest way possible. A text message. No name, just a number. Trust documents drafted, awaiting your signature. Secure link attached. I read it in the bathroom with the shower running, steam fogging the mirror, the sound masking any footsteps outside the door. My hands were steady. That was how I knew I was ready. Fear makes your hands shake. Clarity doesn't. I signed digitally, then deleted the message. By the time the water went cold, the first line of defense was in place. By noon, the house had shifted again. My mother was humming in the kitchen, the way she did when she believed things were under control, when she thought she was the one writing the outcome. My father had taken a sudden interest in my schedule. Where are you headed today? He asked casually as I put my shoes on. I might drive into town, I said. Pick up a few things. He frowned. Maybe that can wait. I met his eyes. Why? He hesitated, then smiled, trying to make caution look like care. You've been tired. I nodded. I'll be careful. I didn't ask for the keys. I picked them up from the bowl by the door before anyone could stop me. My brother watched, jaw tightening, as if I'd taken something that belonged to him. On the drive, I felt that strange relief that comes when a plan finally moves. When you stop being reactive and start being deliberate. I parked outside a small cafe and checked my phone, blending into the ordinary world of people buying lattes and complaining about traffic. Another message from Counselor Hayes, assets secured. Income from both ranches redirected. LA property isolated. No one else has access. I closed my eyes and breathed, feeling something inside me loosen for the first time in days. The next message came an hour later. Background check complete. You were right to call. I stared at the screen. Your parents refinanced their home 18 months ago. Missed multiple payments. Credit cards near limit. Your brother has outstanding personal loans. Gambling related. Your sister co-signed. The cafe noise faded into the background. Cups clinked. A milk steamer hissed. A couple laughed at a table near the window. All of it felt far away, like another world. It hadn't been about protecting me. It had been about survival. About them looking at Grandpa's legacy and seeing a life raft they could grab by pushing my head underwater. That night, dinner was tense. The friendliness had thinned, stretched too far. My mother asked if I'd signed anything with the lawyer yet. Too casual, too bright. No, I said, not yet. My father's fork paused mid-air. You should include us. I will, I replied lightly. When I'm ready. My brother snorted. You're acting paranoid. I looked at him. You're acting desperate. Silence. The kind that makes the room feel smaller. The next morning, my mother announced another appointment without looking at me. Dr. Collins is coming back with a colleague this time. I nodded slowly, as if accepting it, as if resigned. What time? 10, I checked the clock. 9:12, plenty of time. At 9:30, I stepped outside and made one last call. Now, I said when Hayes answered. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. 2 men stood on the porch. Dr. Collins, pale and stiff, and another man in a dark suit who did not smile. This is unnecessary, my mother hissed as they stepped inside, her control slipping around the edges. No, the suited man said calmly, looking past her as if she were furniture. It's overdue. He turned to me. Miss Carter, I'm with Adult Protective Services. My father's face drained of color so fast it was almost shocking. My mother's lips parted, then closed, as if she realized too late that the words she'd rehearsed wouldn't work here. The APS officers didn't raise their voices. They didn't accuse. They asked questions, clear ones, about access to my phone, about my car keys, about medical consent, about pressure. They watched my parents' faces while I answered calmly. They took notes. They asked Dr. Collins what documentation he had, what consent he'd received, what relationship he had with the family. When he tried to interrupt, he was stopped politely, professionally, with the kind of authority that didn't need volume. By noon, the house felt smaller, the walls closer, the air thicker. By 2, my parents were silent. By 4, they were angry. You set us up, my mother spat once the officials left, rage shaking the words loose. No, I said. You did. My brother paced, hands in his hair, eyes wild. What about the properties? I smiled for the first time in days, not with joy, but with certainty. Those are handled. They demanded documents. I gave them nothing. That evening, I packed. I didn't sneak. I didn't rush. I folded my clothes, zipped my bag, and placed it by the door. Each movement was deliberate, calm. My hands didn't shake. I didn't look around for permission. My sister blocked my path, eyes bright with panic. You can't just leave. I can, I said. And I am. My father spoke quietly, trying to reclaim power with a familiar threat. If you walk out, don't expect help. I met his gaze. I never did. When I closed the door behind me, the air felt lighter, cleaner, like I'd stepped out of a room where the oxygen had been rationed. I drove straight to a hotel and slept for 14 hours. The kind of sleep that comes when your body finally believes it might be safe. In the morning, my phone rang. Counselor Hayes again. Final confirmation, he said. Trust is active. Assets are locked. No guardianship petition will survive scrutiny. I smiled into the pillow, feeling something like relief spread through my ribs. They had tried to cage me with concern. Instead, they had handed me proof. I didn't go back to the house after that night. Not right away. I needed space. Real space. Not the kind you borrow while people watch your every move. I checked into a modest hotel near the highway. The kind with beige walls and a humming ice machine that never quite shut up. The carpet smelled faintly of detergent and old air conditioning. It wasn't luxury, but it was quiet. And quiet felt like oxygen. By morning, the messages started. My sister first, can we talk? My brother next, you overreacted. My mother after that, we were only trying to help you. I didn't answer. Instead, I met with Hayes in person at a small office downtown. No plaques on the wall, no unnecessary words. He looked like someone who had learned to survive other people's storms without becoming one himself. He laid out the timeline with a calm precision of someone who had seen this story before. They were preparing to file for emergency guardianship, he said, tapping a folder. They'd claim concern over your mental health following trauma and bereavement. With a cooperating clinician, they could have gained temporary control within days. Temporary, I repeated, tasting the word. He nodded. Temporary can become permanent very quickly. I thought of locked doors, a missing phone, carefully phrased questions, thin oatmeal, my mother's hand closing around mine like a clamp disguised as comfort. What happens now? I asked. They can still try, Hayes said. But the evidence cuts the other way. Coercive control, withholding communication, financial motive, APS involvement, changes the landscape. And the properties? Untouchable, he replied. Your trust is airtight. I exhaled slowly, the breath leaving my body like something I'd been holding for weeks. For the first time since the porch, since the whispers, since the word guardianship had crawled into my ears, my chest loosened. That afternoon, I returned not to the house, but to the curb in front of it. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the familiar shape of the place that had taught me how easily love could be confused with ownership. The porch railing still peeled. The wind chimes still clinked. The lace curtain still hung unchanged. It looked harmless. That was the trick. It had always looked harmless. Then I crossed. My mother opened the door before I knocked. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but from rage held too long. You brought strangers into this, she said. I brought professionals, I replied. There's a difference. My father stood behind her, stiff and silent. My siblings hovered in the living room, caught between anger and fear, as if they couldn't decide whether I was prey or threat. I'm here to be clear, I said. Not to argue. My brother scoffed. Clear about what? I took out a single sheet of paper. No logos, no seals, just plain language, the kind that leaves no room to twist intent. This, I said, is notice. My mother's breath caught. Notice of what? Of boundaries, I answered. Effective immediately. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The calm did more damage than shouting ever could. I will not sign anything you present. I will not submit to evaluations arranged without my consent. Any further attempts to restrict my movement, access my communications, or misrepresent my capacity will be documented and forwarded to my counsel and to APS. My sister stepped forward, face tight with something like betrayal. You're tearing this family apart. I looked at her, really looked. I saw fear under the anger, and I saw how quickly fear had turned into justification. No, I said. I'm refusing to be torn down. My father finally spoke. You think money makes you right? I shook my head. Money revealed what you were willing to do. Silence spread thick and heavy. My mother's voice cracked, and for a moment it sounded almost real. "We're your parents." "And I'm your daughter," I replied. "Not your asset." I left the paper on the console table and turned toward the door. "Wait," my brother called. "What about us?" I paused, not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted the words to land without heat. "I don't owe you access," I said. "I don't owe you obedience, and I don't owe you silence." Outside, the sky had begun to darken. The air carried the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. I walked back to my car without looking back. That night, Hayes called again. "They won't file," he said. "Not with APS watching. Not with the evidence you have." "Good," I replied. "There's one more thing," he added. "The LA property. Do you want to see it?" I did. 2 days later, I stood in a quiet neighborhood where the air smelled like jasmine and asphalt warming in the sun. The street was lined with trees that threw soft shade onto the sidewalk. The house wasn't a mansion. It was solid, thoughtful, clean lines, light pouring through windows that faced west, catching dust motes and turning them into slow-floating gold. "It suits you," Hayes said. I walked through the rooms slowly. I touched the walls, feeling the cool paint under my fingertips. I opened cabinets, not looking for anything specific, just learning the weight of new space. I stood in the kitchen and imagined mornings without tension, evenings without surveillance. A life where decisions were mine alone. That night, my phone rang one last time. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. "Careful. We need to talk." I deleted it because some conversations aren't unfinished. They're complete. I moved into the LA house quietly. No announcement, no posts, just a key turning in a lock that belonged to me alone. The first night I slept on a mattress on the floor with the windows open. The sound of the city drifting in, cars far away, a dog barking, someone laughing 2 streets over. It felt strange, that mix of loneliness and relief, like taking off a heavy pack you didn't realize you'd been carrying for miles. The ranches came next. I flew out to see them one by one. Dust on my boots, wind moving through tall grass, hands that knew the land better than they knew paperwork. Grandpa had been right to trust me with them. They weren't trophies. They were responsibilities, work, continuity. I didn't sell them. Instead, I hired managers who knew what they were doing and left clear instructions: fair wages, transparency, no shortcuts. Income flowed into the trust exactly as planned, steady and predictable. And safe took on a new meaning. Not a word someone used to control me, but a condition I built for myself. Back at the house, I set boundaries the way I'd learned to in uniform. Clearly, calmly, in writing. 1 email to my family. No accusations. No apologies. I'm safe. I'm stable. I'm not discussing assets. Please respect my request for space. Any further contact should be about health or emergencies only. I didn't ask for understanding. I didn't explain myself. Their responses came anyway. My sister sent paragraphs about forgiveness and keeping the family together, as if togetherness were always good, regardless of what it cost. My brother tried humor, then guilt, then anger, cycling through tactics like a salesman. My father sent one sentence. "You've changed." He was right. My mother waited the longest. When her message finally came, it wasn't dramatic, just a single line. "We never meant to hurt you." I read it twice. Then I set the phone down and went back to what I was doing, which for the first time in a long time was choosing my own life. Weeks passed. Then months. The quiet stopped feeling empty and started feeling full. I set up a small office in the spare room, sunlight sliding across the desk in the afternoons. I volunteered with an organization that helped veterans navigate financial abuse, because it happens more than people like to admit, and because silence protects the wrong people. There was something bitterly familiar in the stories. Families using concern as a leash, using medical language like a weapon, using love as proof of ownership. I learned how many people had been quietly cornered the same way I had been, and how many never got out. Sometimes late at night, I thought about the porch, the door, the moment everything could have gone another way. I thought about how close I came to knocking, to handing over the envelope, to trusting people who had already decided who I was allowed to be. I didn't feel sharp anger anymore. Not most days. What I felt was clarity. Family isn't the people who demand control when you're vulnerable. Love isn't something that requires your signature. Concern isn't something that locks doors. One afternoon, while I was sorting mail, a familiar name appeared on an envelope. My sister's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I made tea, the steam rising in thin curls, the scent grounding me. I stood by the window and watched the sun tilt toward evening, turning the street outside into soft amber. The letter wasn't an apology. It wasn't a threat either. It was something quieter. She wrote about fear, about money, about how quickly people can convince themselves they're doing the right thing when they're really just afraid of losing comfort. She didn't excuse what they'd done, not directly, but she didn't deny it either. The honesty in that partial, shaky, incomplete message felt like the first crack in a wall that had always been solid. I folded the letter and put it away. Maybe one day we would talk. Maybe not. That decision didn't have to be made immediately, and that too was freedom. On my birthday, I visited Grandpa's grave alone. The cemetery was quiet, the grass trimmed short, the air cool with early morning. I stood over the stone and traced his name with my eyes, feeling the familiar ache of missing him settle into place like a bruise. The wind moved through the trees, leaves whispering against each other. "Thank you," I said aloud, feeling a little foolish and not caring. Not just for the properties. For the lesson. For seeing me. For trusting my silence. I swallowed, throat tight, and let the words come anyway. I did okay. I think you'd be proud. The wind shifted, brushing against my face like a hand that wasn't there. And for a moment, that was enough of an answer. If there was one thing I had learned through all of it, it was that strength doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like preparation. Sometimes it looks like walking away without slamming the door. So, honestly, after hearing all that, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between family and your own well-being? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.